Hello again and welcome to Rock and Roll. You're on PodHub, you're on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks for joining me. We'll bring you the show that brings you everything about Sri Lanka schools rugby. At the start of the show, let's look back at what happened last week. Now, the games resumed this week, and thanks very much to Minister Harin Fernando, who said that he was going to get in and make sure the games resumed. The referees were back, and we are very grateful to have the referees back. But let's look back at what happened at week 4 in the school's rugby scene, because that was a resumption of the action. How had that 1 week break affected all the schools? Was it a good break for them? Was it a bad break for them? Let's find out. You're with Siak. The road is yours.
Radio. The road is yours.
So here are the results from last week's games. Now, a couple of really surprising results for me. There are a couple of mini upsets, I'd like to call them that. There are a couple of games that went the way we thought they would go, but a couple of mini upsets. We'll look at all those and all the results, in fact, in a moment. The first one of those upsets was this Zaire versus Vidyartha game. Now, Vidyartha, we all know, like to play a nice running game. They like to move the ball, and they have a big set of forwards. They have a good line out, and they like to have quick ball and work well with it. Unfortunately, what they didn't bank for, what maybe Sumedha Malavena and his team didn't really do enough preparation for in the preseason, is the kind of weather we've been having. So the weather has been pretty atrocious, and unfortunately, this Vidyartha team, who I think is much better than just being a one-try team, managed to score just a one try. So did Zaira, and it came down to just one penalty between the two teams. That's the only thing that separated them. But Zaira at home, they used that home advantage to good measure and managed to come out with a win that I think they will really cherish, because they were struggling up to that point, and beating Vidyartha will give them a lot of confidence, because Vidyartha had been one of the better sides this season so far. Let's move on to the other slight upset that I thought would happen. I expected DS Serenayaka to pretty much walk away with this game quite easily. They had been unbeaten in the first 3 games of the season, but then of course we talked about that break. And when the break happens, teams that are going into the good momentum tend to have a slight bit of a dip, and teams that haven't been doing so well get a chance to regroup. And that seemed like exactly what happened for St. Thomas's, because they managed to score a massive 4 tries and get a bonus point as well against DS. You'd offer this score to any Stomian fan and they would have thought you were taking the mickey. But unfortunately for DS, they just didn't turn up on the day. Of course, the weather had a factor to playing that as well. And the Big Clubs round is a difficult place to travel to if you haven't played there very often. Last time this fixture, it was DS that won at Havelock Park, and this time at St. Thomas's, it wasn't as easy for them. And Umagiliage, I thought, had a very good game with the boot, but unfortunately no one else really turned up for DS, and Bulak Singalage at the back for St. Thomas's really drove the team forward with his big long kicks, and the Thomian forwards were at the forefront of everything. 4 tries, 3 conversions and a penalty in the end, and a comfortable win for St. Thomas's. Didn't think that was going to happen, but well done to Anuranga Valpola and his team for getting his team to be better and better each game. Let's move on now to Science versus Sri Sumangala game. This was a controversial game. It was played at Police Park. Unfortunately, no spectators allowed for Science, of course, so we're not having a lot of visuals there, but they managed to win that one pretty comfortably, 41 points to 12, and I think they'll be happy with being able to come back, put all that off-field stuff behind them, and actually concentrate on the rugby. That's exactly what they did. 41 points to 12, and Sri Sumangala continues to struggle. You have to feel for them that they will probably be going down back to the B division next year, but they will be much happier for the experience that they have gotten with this team. Then, of course, we had a blockbuster of a game, Royal taking on Wesley at Havelock Park on the Friday. And once again, at halftime, Wesley found themselves in front. We said that when they played the other league favourites, which were St. Peter's, they found themselves in front at halftime on that game as well. This time it was 6 points to nil. And in the end, it was Royal that came through with the superior conditioning, and they managed to win some key moments of that second half. It wasn't as convincing a victory, and you'll see that Royal have also missed the bonus point, which St. Peter's did manage to pick up against Wesley, but they will be a little worried about that, but perhaps it won't affect them later on in the season. So 3 tries to Royal, 3 of them converted. I thought Nabil Yahya had an outstanding game off the tee, and it looks like coming back into that number 12 position has given him a little bit more freedom, doesn't ask him to cover too much ground, and it looks like it might be the position for him going forward. Wesley, of course, scored the 1 try, but later on in the game, and Abdul Had, with a few penalties, managed to keep them in touch with Royal, but not for long enough. They were in touch for maybe 50 minutes of that game, but in the last 20, Royal really pulled away. Then, of course, we had that big derby game, St. Peter's taking on St. Joseph's, and that was for the Father Rosati Trophy. This is the biggest game for the Peterites and the Josephians, of course, and that one ended up in St. Peter's favour. And we heard Minister Harin Fernando say he's looking forward to next year's fixture, not yet this year's fixture so much. So St. Joseph's just managed to score the 1 try, and that was converted, and they had 1 penalty as well to their name. But St. Peter's getting a bonus point win, and apart from the trophy as well, apart from the bragging rights, they will really like to have that bonus point under their belt when it comes down to the brass tacks. So a comfortable win for the Peterites in that encounter as well. Kingswood, who had been really winless for a long time, managed to end up with a win over Thurston up in Kandy, and they would have been very happy for that, but it wasn't a pretty game. But they managed to score 5 tries nevertheless, converting 3 of those. Thurston crossing the line twice as well. Thurston have been able to score tries, so they're there or thereabouts, but they just perhaps don't have the size and the conditioning to challenge the big schools at the moment. The next game, of course, the controversial match between Isipathana and Trinity. We'll talk about that with our guest in studio in just a few moments, but this one ended up 15 points to 13. Trinity leading 13 points to 8 for much of that game, but Isipathana coming back, managing to score a crucial try, which took them up to that 15-point mark, and it was enough. Neither of the teams coming away with a bonus point, but just a penalty once again that separated the two teams, just like our previous upset win between Zahira and Vidyartha as well. Just that 1 penalty separating, 1 conversion rather, separating them. So that's the way things looked. It was a pretty dodgy game in terms of the conditions, the underfoot conditions, and these are 2 teams that really like to run as well, but the weather really didn't help at all. But the fact remains that there were a few controversial issues in that game, which we'll talk about later on the show.
Radials, the road is yours.
As you know, on Rock and Roll, we talk to the people who make the news and the people who understand in depth exactly what is going on. Refereeing has been a controversial topic over the last few weeks, and it's not been any less since we resumed play over the last weekend. And we have someone a little bit independent, a little bit detached from this entire program that's happening here, to give us his insight as to what he thinks is happening on the ground and what we might be able to do to improve it. We have online with us, all the way from the UK, Mr. Bandara Vakadapula, who is a referee who was still refereeing even when I was playing Vaka, so that's a long time ago. I think you started just about when I was finishing up playing. You moved to the UK now. Tell us a little bit about your refereeing history in the UK.
Thanks, Janaka. Thanks for having me today. Yes, I played Police Sports Club before I moved the last 1996 to 2005. I left to 2005 UK and joined the London Society 2007. Since 2007 now, nearly around 17 years, so I'm really enjoying refereeing in London Society. So remarkable journey, so I'm really,
If I remember right, you've even refereed at Twickenham, haven't you, Wacky?
Yes, that was a dream. So I had a chance to step onto the grass, quite remarkable. So it's very dream. It's a great dream. Yes.
Yeah, it is a great dream, but 2007, and you've already found your way to Twickenham despite being someone who's coming from the outside, despite not having the same skin color and all that kind of thing. Those are all obstacles we face, Swake. But tell us how the journey was getting into the Referees Society there and progressing up the ranks. How different is it from what it is here?
I joined the first. I was came in 2005. There's a lot of clubs around, so every club they have their own referee section. So every Sunday, normally we have a junior games. So many junior games. So I thought better to go back and do something on rugby, and refereeing is the best thing to do. So I joined my local club, Ealing Trailfinders that time. They had a great section of referees. And I joined them. I started with under 12s, 10s, and then 14s. I did that 2-3 months, and then they identified me. It's time to go and join the society and do the senior level game. So after 2-3 months, I joined the society and 2 weekends fully training. They gave me an appointment for next weekend to go and referee the senior level and have fun. So it wasn't fun anyway. So I just came from Sri Lanka 2 years. My language ability was absolutely zero. But what I want to say is the players and the club will really welcome me. The level at the second team game, the level 10, level 11, 2007. They knowing I'm just new to the refereeing, and they know I am know much about English culture of rugby, and they knowing my English language is very bad at that time, but they really welcome me and help me to finish the game very well. And I'm still going there after 17 years. I'm still having if I'm free, I'm crossing that road, having a pint with them, so enjoying. It's a great memory of the first game. So quite enjoyable. The people are really welcoming you if you go to any club. So it's quite amazing, nice experience of the first one.
Well, that's really good to hear from a referee's point of view, Wacky, but it's a little different here, isn't it? You've been following what's been going on, and referees aren't the most popular people with the players, the coaches, or indeed the crowd. What do you think is the reason for that?
So, I'm following Sri Lankan referees when I start playing from 1990. But we knowing the bit of laws only when I start refereeing. Until that, as a player, I don't know anything about laws. I think you experience it as a player. We don't know much about the laws. We just go and play penalizing. We don't know what the reason to penalize, and we know but little, but not deep. I understood that the reason is in Sri Lanka and the referees are great. There's no issue with the referees. The issue is what I found is their understanding of the modern game. Rather than knowing the laws, they need to understand the application of laws, how we are applying the modern rugby into the scenarios and situations. That's quite different than knowing the law and the application of the law. If you know the application laws properly, how do you apply that law into the situation? So quite easy to understand the modern rugby. The coaches
how do you train someone to do that, Wacky? How do you train someone to apply the law?
So the train means that everybody knows the laws now when they come to the field. We know this. In Sri Lanka, I believe everybody knows the law very well. Because all the referees knowing the law is nice. But issue is how their application applied to that current situation, with the taking of the bit from the law and then applying to the situation. That's need to come from the coaches. The coaches need to help them. They need to help them. The scenario into one-by-one coaching sessions. Reviewing sessions. So I don't know whether that's happening in Sri Lanka. That's the main issue that because a lot of rugby is going on the TV now. So everybody watching, so many rugby going on. The referees are explaining rules and everything on the mic, so we can hear it. So that's people now getting more knowledge on the laws now, and that's people understanding when they come to Sri Lanka and watching our game, school game. Whatever happened in the situation, referees not clarify what's happening there. We just straight away penalizing. But if you be there for another extra 1 or 2 seconds, we can avoid that penalty. We can move with the game flow. Currently, it's not happening.
And how does that system need to change, Wacky? How does it happen there? How is the feedback level that comes in? Who do you talk to after you finish a game? How do you review your season? How do you make sure that you fix whatever was in the last game for the next game? How do you do it there?
So here, we have a good system in place. Believing Shanaka, in the London Society on one weekend, we are appointing near around 450 to 500 games referees. It's a massive amount of games going on in the one weekend. On the societies, we are supplying referees to the RFU society, developing the referees, and when they come to a certain level, RFU taking on board and they taking care of from there onwards. Society have three mechanisms: the assessors there, mentors there, and coaches are there. Coaches and mentors going close to work with the referees, then looking after them, going to matches, and then find out the mistakes they do, and the one-to-one coaching sessions individually, and then review their game and give the game to work on. The assessor comes, he looking the referee the snapshot of the game, and then he giving the referees capable to handle that game. That's his job. So giving an honest picture, I got a lot of blames early stage, and then we thought we are doing well. But when the assessor talking to us after the game around 45 to 1 hour, and he explained everything, then only we realized we are not that level. We missed a lot. So he's not giving the game plan. He giving the honest picture of the entire match, and our coaches working with us and then taking over. They making a game plan, and we working with them, and then doing the quick individual review, one-to-one coachings. They really help us to go to that, eradicate that all the mistakes that we're doing. But still, mistakes can happen. It's not easy to repeat the game. But next week, you can't do the same thing again. That's what happened in Sri Lanka.
Yes, and I think that's what a lot of fans and coaches are also pointing out, that it seems to be the same thing repeating itself. I think everyone's fairly sure that you can't referee any game without making some kind of a small mistake. But what we see is that there is a repetition of the same thing over and over again. So is that the referee's fault? Is that the coach's fault for not having enough dialogue? Or is it the referee coach's fault? Where does this blame lie? Or is it with everyone?
I think everyone will take responsibility. Referee can't say, I didn't get it, I had nobody coaching me. But I think Sri Lankan referees now nearly around doing last 6-7 years now. So the same coach people, the same referees. I'm not blaming the referees entirely, so they have some kind of responsibility as well to learn the mistakes. The coaches and the assessors, who are in Sri Lanka, they have a massive role to play. Look like that's breaking down. That's not happening, look like. So that's the reason that otherwise the same referee what he will do the 2-3 weeks ago, and he's coming and doing the same thing every week. So that means he never reviewed himself, or coaches didn't have time to understand what is the mistake. So then that's why the frustration all build up, and came that very bad incident. So we never expect that to happen. But everybody need to have a responsibility to overcome this issue.
Yes, and moving to that incident, where we had that situation at the Science College versus St. Thomas's game. How is that usually dealt with in the UK? Say there is some referee abuse, or there is some unfortunate referee assault or something like that. Have you experienced a situation like that where something has happened to one of your society members, and what was the procedure taken to prevent it later?
Yeah, referees abuse happening everywhere. It's not only the Sri Lanka. But London Society, we take it very seriously, and we have a lot of procedures in place, and we have any abuse taking place on the ground. It is my game. It happened to me a couple of times. We're not getting massive number like Sri Lanka, 1,000. We get 100, 200 people sometimes, or 50, 100 people. If somewhere abusing, if I hear in the corner somebody abusing me, First I warned the captain and asked him to go and stop him. And then, if it's not happening, so we stopped the game. We asked him to leave the ground. Until we leave the ground, we not starting the game. So, captain helping us, they go and talk to the people. They ask him to stop it, and if he not stop, so we stop the game, and then everybody go in there and ask him to leave the ground. So they support getting. The clubs are never accepted the abuse. Some coaches are getting, it's more words coming. They're not nice. But after the games, everybody will come to the club, having a pint, and then have a chat. All the questions, whatever they have faced during the match, they talk to us, and then we resolve it before we leave the club. We don't leave anything behind. So that's what is happening here.
Well, that's good to hear, Vake. How do you think we can move forward as a rugby community?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Sorry, I was asking, how do you think we can move forward as a rugby community so that we don't keep going back to these incidents?
I think the SLR is not there anymore. That's sad. So Sri Lanka. So a couple of years ago, one of the members came to me and I said, referees section, so my suggestion is need to develop a referees section in SLR, under SLR. So referee society need to develop referees and need to supply referees SLR. And the SLR need to maintain that top level games on Sri Lanka, like the club level and the schools. They should maintain a separate referees division, referees section, and referees section. So they're going to keep working. So that might be help to develop a section and take responsibility on these repeating issues.
Yeah, so let's see whether we can try and work in that direction. Unfortunately, we've been talking about this for a long time, Wake, but thank you for giving us some insight into how a working system actually functions. And we'll try and figure out whether we can take some of those learnings and put it into the Sri Lankan system as well. Hopefully, we'll talk to you during the course of this season a couple more times. Thanks very much, Wake, for joining us.
No, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers. That was Bandara Vakatapola joining us all the way from the UK. You heard him tell us about how a functioning system of a referee society works. There's assessment, there's in-game assessment, there's after-match assessment, and also there's an acceptance of the fact that referees, yes, will make mistakes. But I think where Sri Lankan, the Sri Lankan public, and especially the Sri Lankan coaches and players are getting frustrated, is it seems to be that there is no dialogue, and there is no moving forward, and there is no intent to move forward as well. The argument from the coaches is, look, we are spending a lot of money and we're putting in a lot of time to train these players. The schools are saying the same thing. We're paying the coaches top bucks. And the people who are coming in to watch are saying, look, our kids are spending so much time playing this rugby, and we've now put so much energy and resources into these two aspects of the game. We want the referees to do the same thing. And that's the question that is being asked. Is it something that the referees are equally contributing to? Is I think the issue that that is at the forefront of everyone's mouth, and hopefully the referee society will be able to speak to them sooner rather than later and ask them what their response is to the whole thing. And of course we can follow up on what accountability measures have been taken after the Science College game to the people who actually did assault the referees, who were on camera and who have been identified, and we have been told by Science College that they have identified them and given the names to the police as well. So let's find out what is happening in that regard as well when we speak to the referees eventually. So keep it tuned to Ruck and Roll to find out exactly what's happening with this saga. We'll be following that closely, and thanks very much to Bandara Vakatapola for coming out and telling us exactly what he thinks of the situation as well. Let us know what you think of the situation too. Please comment, make any of these comments that you like, and ask us any questions you like, and we'll try to give you the best answers from the best people. You're on Rock and Roll, and we're looking back at last week's fixtures, of course, looking ahead to next week's fixtures as well. And with me, I have my usual guest, Abdullah Yusuf, to talk about what went on last weekend and look forward to what we hope will be a bunch of clashes next weekend as well, Abdas. Let's talk about Vidyartha and Zahira. Those were two running teams. Unfortunately, the weather conspired and the conditions were awful. But I expected Vidyartha to win that one comfortably. But Zahira, a superb performance from them.
Absolutely. Zahira, they have threatened to bring this kind of performance throughout the season. But playing at home, Vidyartha travelling, there were signs that there could be an upset because even against the other teams, or rather Zahira went down, they did run those teams ragged to a certain extent. It's just that the superior physicality of the other teams made them struggle towards the latter stage of their games. Vidyartha, as such, is not a very physically dominant team. So I think Zahira managed to stay with them for the duration of the game and eventually managed to pull it out. So it's a good result for Zahira, but I'm sure Vidyartha from their point of view will be pretty disappointed with the result.
Speaking of disappointing results, of course, DS, who had a 3-match unbeaten streak, went to St. Thomas's and ended up losing that streak. We were there at that game, and we were both as surprised as each other because we didn't expect St. Thomas's to pull that one out of the hat.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing in that game is St. Thomas's, especially in that first half, they just got a few chances, and every time they went into DS's 22, they made it count. DS, on the other hand, were very wasteful in the opportunities they got. They did not capitalize, they did not execute under what you'd have to say were pretty trying conditions as well, because the grounds were pretty wet. And probably the non-familiarity with the conditions also played its part to a certain extent. But take nothing away from St. Thomas's. I thought their first half performance, they hung in there defensively, and when they got their opportunities, they took it. And I think that lead at the first half was a bit too much for DS to come back from in the second half.
Yes, a big forward pack that DS has this year, probably maybe second to Royal and maybe even St. Peter's. But you'd expected them to be dominant in those conditions, but somehow they didn't seem to have the familiarity with playing really tight rugby.
Yeah, that's right. I think probably playing these crucial games took its toll on them eventually, and also I think they're not quite accustomed in playing the catch-up game. Once they conceded that lead at the half-time, you could see a sense of desperation coming into their play, and they started making errors when they got close to the line. Just that composure lacked at crucial moments, and unfortunately for them, that just impacted the result going in their favour in that game. But nonetheless, it's just their first loss. Still very much in the running, so it'll be interesting to see how they will perform in the remaining matches.
Yes, we have Trinity, DS and St. Thomas's all vying for second place in that group. Pisipatana, of course, sitting at the top of that group, still unbeaten. But let's talk about that game as well. We had another controversial game, of course. Refereeing issues are being talked about. But let's talk about the rugby in that game first. Pisipatana taking on Trinity, coming down for another crucial match. They were lucky enough only to play St. Thomas's at home, and they won that one comfortably. But home and away, make a huge difference for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, especially the handy teams are coming down to Colombo, isn't it? Just that humidity level that they have to experience in Colombo. It takes a little bit of time for them to get used to it, and it's not very easy. And especially in these close games, it could have gone either way. And of course, as we all know how the game ended, it could have gone the other way as well, but it is what it is.
Well, 3 tries were scored, 2 of them by Isipatana, and Isipatana's first try has been the subject of controversy. You've seen the visuals on your screen as well, and here they are. The assistant referee, the only thing you can ask about is positioning, and he's there on the 5 meter watching whether the Isipatana player's foot goes into touch, whether he gets dragged out. That seems to be his duty at that point. He can't see what happens to the ball because a Trinity player comes around and covers his angle, and the second Trinity tackler also seems to be right in the way of referee Ravin Alexander's view. You have to say, just a really unfortunate confluence of events there.
Yes, very unfortunate, really. I mean, just looking at that, both the referee as well as his assistant unfortunately seem to have blocked by the Trinity tacklers on either side. It's really unfortunate, and you could just see the emotions running high, especially from the Trinity camp. But it's one of those things, in this particular instance, I don't think you can totally blame the referee and his assistant as well, because they were covered, and just there was also a lot of conjecture about the assistant ref's positioning. But if you look at that, his first priority seems to have been to see whether there would be a foot in touch. And that was his main focus, and as a result of that, both the adjudicators were unsighted by the grounding, and they had to, I guess, go by their gut instinct on that instance rather than any substantial proof. So unfortunate from Trinity's point of view, but what can you say?
Yes, I think the guy who really decided what went on there was the the Isipatana support player. I think it was the number 6 who made the pass. In fact, the entire situation is entirely his fault, because if he'd given the ball a little bit earlier, his winger would have been in for the try. But look at his body language when the try is scored. If you can see it here first. He's the one closest to the action, really, because the assistant referee is unsighted by the Trinity defender that comes across. And that's the Isipatana number 6. And you can see he doesn't really celebrate. He starts taking his arm up and then brings it down back very quickly. But what Abdullah said was, there are people who think that the try should have been given, should not have been given. That may be true. But what is actually the fact is that referees can't assume, Abdullah. And they did have a chat. Unfortunately, due to this whole sponsorship mic issue, we don't know what they talked about. But the fact is that it was probably an educated guess. And you can't really guess when you're in these games. If you don't see a clear grounding, you can't really assume that it has happened. I think that's probably what will be discussed at the referees meeting. Unless you see it, don't give it. Because now we have this footage, we have fans who are savvy, we have fans with their phone cameras, and they are the TMO now.
Yeah, absolutely. And even from those visuals which we saw, there were at least another couple of people holding their camera phones up as well, so they could very clearly see what happened, as well as it was all recorded as well. Also, I think what they probably assumed, again, we just come back, they raised this decision on assumption, is that while grounding the ball went in front rather than him knocking it on. So it was one of those pretty unfortunate incidents. For what you have to say, given the conditions, was a very good game between two very good teams.
Yes, I thought both teams played really well given what was underfoot, and there was plenty of patches of mud, plenty of patches of still water in those grounds as well. But I thought the ball handling error rate was quite low, and that was really very good rugby from two teams that I think deserve to go through to the next round. Trinity may not make it, but I think they have played some good rugby this season.
Yes, they most definitely have. Probably they had just that one off day against DS, which could come back to haunt them in the final analysis. But other than that, they are a good team. They've got certain players in certain positions who can cause problems to the opposition. But also the fact that they had to travel down to Colombo for most of their games also hasn't quite helped their cause. But they're still not out of it. But the only thing is they'll have to depend on how other results go in that group for them to make it to the Super Round.
Yes. So let's have a look at next week's fixtures. What do we have on offer? We have St. Peter's taking on Zaira, and you have to think that St. Peter's is going to win that one pretty comfortably. Trinity taking on St. Anthony's, all candy, no travelling involved for either of the teams. So you have to think Trinity are going to want to put a big set of points on the St. Anthony's team. St. Joseph's taking on Royal Abdullah, and that St. Joseph's hosting that one at Havelocks. Do you think that there is going to be maybe Royal losing another bonus point perhaps?
Well, I think conditions could play a part in it as well, Shanaka. If the conditions are relatively dry, I'd back Royal to get that bonus point win. But if it's underfoot conditions are a bit soggy and rain starts coming down, then it could be a bit of a 50-50 call in terms of Royal getting the bonus point. It's not that I'm writing off St. Joseph's completely, but the form that Royal is in and the confidence which they're playing, I find it hard to see them slipping up against the Josephians. So the key factor for them is to try and get that bonus point win. And if they can do that, it'll just set them up very well for the following week's big game.
Yes, there is a big one coming up. We'll talk about that, of course, on next week's show. And then we have Wesley taking on Kingswood. Expect Wesley to win that one comfortably. And I would like to see Wesley, their back scoring some tries. They're just about there, want to drag themselves over the line. St. Thomas's have to make sure that they get their bonus point win against Sri Sumangala. They can't be too cocky about where they find themselves on that leaderboard at the moment, and they need to go in and make sure all their players get a game as well, get some experience in this game, but make sure they win comfortably. And then, of course, the match of the weekend at the Sukadadasa Stadium, not a venue that we're used to going to too often, Abdullah, but DS hosting Isipatana there, and that's going to kind of take the Isipatana crowd out of the equation as well. So the crowd that really brings Isipatana a lot of oomph, as it were, might be a little bit distant. They might not be able to be as vocal, as loud. They won't be able to bring that same pressure. Do you think that DS have what it takes to put themselves back in that number 2 or number 1 position?
Well, I just considering their strengths, which is their pack, DS do have a shout. I have no doubt about that. Just having seen a couple of their games, they've got a forward pack and can trouble Isipatana. But what they've got to ensure that they do well is to control position, because as we all know, the Isipatana backs are outstanding. And if DS can just control position, keep it tight, not be too loose, they have a tendency to kick a lot. So they've got to be a bit careful, because the Isipatana back three can be very dangerous. So just taking all those things into consideration, if they can control position and just stick to a game plan and not give too much turnover ball, they are definitely in with a shout. But at the end of the day, Isipatana, having played these kind of big games, you'd have to say going to that game as clear favourites.
Yes, they will be clear favourites, that's without a doubt. DS wanting to avoid their second loss of the season and keep themselves in with a shout of going through in that number 2 position. That's going to be the key match of next weekend. We have Vidyartha taking on Thurston. That should be a close game, but expect Vidyartha to win that one. And of course, Dharmaraja taking on Science. That might be a little closer than anticipated, Abdullah, especially because Science are travelling away and going up to Dharmaraja. Pallakale Stadium, a difficult place to tour to as well. And you have to say that Dharmaraja may be on the verge of making an upset there.
Yes, especially the fact that they are playing at home. So it will be interesting to see how well Science do travel. Again, I feel the underfoot conditions could play a part. If it's dry conditions, Science would probably fancy themselves because that Pallakale ground width-wise is quite large as well. So there'll be that extra few meters on either side for them to work with. But again, if the conditions are a bit heavy and the rain does come down, then we'll probably be back Dharmaraja playing up in Kandy to pull that one off.
Well, lots to expect, of course, on the weekend. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll be looking forward to one mighty factor on the weekend, and that is the weather. So what are they all playing for? What's this all about? They're all playing to get into the top 2 to try and advance to the Super Round. But let's look at how things stand pretty much halfway through the first round of league games. Here's the Group 1A standings, and Isipatana still remain unbeaten. Before the start of this weekend, we had DS also who are unbeaten, but they went down much to the chagrin of their supporters. They went down to a spirited St. Thomas's team at Mount Lavinia, but that has really dented their chances, but they can still make it to the top 2, even though St. Thomas's are still in second place at the moment. Isipatana with 22 points, St. Thomas's and DS at 2 and 3. Why? Most people are asking why, because DS Serenayake have scored more points for, and they have less points against as well, and they have 3 bonus points. So everyone's asking why is DS at 3? The reason is because the head-to-head is the first criteria they look at when teams are tied on points. So that's why St. Thomas's have gone ahead of DS. But of course, DS will come back to that top position if they manage to beat the other teams that are in the league, because they have already played the tough teams. They've already played, they have to play Isipatana next weekend. That will pretty much decide their fate. They've already played Trinity and they will have to play Science as well. It's going to be an interesting lead up for DS Serenayake. St. Thomas will be very happy to be there when this entire round ends, but that will remain to be seen, because Trinity also will have another opportunity to try and come up to the top. But given that they've lost to both Isipatana and the DS Serenayake, it looks very unlikely that they will be able to make it. So Science winning against Thurston as well, that was a big win, against Sri Sumangala, that was a big win for them. Dharmaraja coming up with their first win as well. St. Anthony's and Sri Sumangala continue to bring up the rear, and the poor old Antonians, it looks like they might have run out of depth in their squad, and that's something that you have to be feel really badly for them about, because sometimes you're able to put 15 good players on the path, and if you don't have 25 good players, things can get a little bit hairy towards the end of the season, and that seems to be what's happening to the Antonians at the moment. Let's take a look at Group 2A now. And of course, you have your two front runners, the league favourites, St. Peter's and Royal, at top and bottom. Of course, Wesley have impacted it. Like we thought, Wesley might make some league-changing impacts in this tournament, and they have done that by depriving Royal of the bonus point, which means that Royal are very clearly in second place, and St. Peter's, courtesy of that thrashing of Thurston early on, they have 208 points for as well, which means they're way out in front of Royal College by about 60 points or more. We have Vidyartha in second, even though they lost to Zaira over the weekend, and we have St. Joseph's in fourth. We have Wesley in fifth, and I think that's a little unfair for Wesley because they're much better than fifth place in this Group 2A. And look for some good results when Vidyartha, St. Joseph's, Wesley and Zaira play each other. Those are going to be some really interesting games. Kingswood getting their first win of the season over the last weekend as well, and Thurston, of course, bringing up the rear. 260 points they have conceded in their 4 outings, and that doesn't make pretty reading for them, but that's what happens when you have so many teams in the A division. There's going to be a bit of a gulf between some of them and others. So that's what the tables look like at the end of week 4. Well, that's our show for this weekend. Thanks a lot for joining us on Ruck and Roll. Don't forget to subscribe to PodHub on YouTube and, of course, the Facebook page. See you next week.